Hello, you guys. Happy Thursday, and welcome to our little live stream. So, as usual, I've got my cup of tea. This is my favorite. This is Scottish Highlands tea. It's so good. And I'm going to just pour a cup of tea, and I have so many things to talk to you about today. So many things. So, we're gonna have a little chat about finding our voices, as musicians, as artists, as people, how to express your voice, and just some other things as well. So, hi, Vincent. Hi. I'm so happy you're here. Do you have your tea or your ice cream? Oh, you guys. Well, let's just kind of all have a little sip of tea first. Hi, Steve. Of course you got your tea. Good. Well, cheers. So let's just all get settled for a little bit, and then I have lots to discuss with you. Some interesting things, I think. I recently got a new candle. I'm not going to talk to you about this, but just while you guys are getting here, this smells like coffee with like a little bit of caramel in it. It is so fabulous. It's my favorite candle. Would have this on in the background, but it kind of gives me a headache as well, so I don't know. It is apparently 100% soybean wax candle, so it's a better candle, I guess. Anyway, okay, well, it seems like there's a few of you here, so I'm gonna just get right into it. First of all, I have a story to tell you. So, this last weekend, we went to the woods, or we went to kind of the countryside and had a little staycation, and it was so magical. It was so nice to get out into the forest, out into just a different vibe area. Hi, Jefferson. So we had a really magical time, and it was just really nice to get away. Sometimes you just need a little staycation. It doesn't have to be a crazily expensive time. Just go stay somewhere for a night, be in a different vibe, be in a different place, and it's just really, really nice. So when we were there, we went into this bookstore, and I really like old like kind of used bookstores, and they're just, you can always find something really good in there. And I found so many awesome like editions of books in this old bookstore. But I went over to the poetry section, and when I was growing up, going through school, one of my teachers, my 6th grade teacher actually, he was like the one really, really, really influential teacher in my just normal mainstream school experience that really impacted me. And he had us read and memorize poetry, and it's like ever since 6th grade, I have never, had a teacher have us memorize any poetry or even really expose us to much poetry at all. So I always fondly remember that experience. So I went back and I found this Henry David Thoreau. I guess it's just Walden and civil disobedience, his thoughts on those two subjects. And I also found the collected poems, complete and unabridged, the poetry of Robert Frost. So because I fondly remember learning poetry, I just thought that it would be nice to kind of get some and just delve into it again. And I think part of that was sparked by the fact that the past several months I've been studying medieval and ancient music with my studio. Our little cat is right over there, and she decided to nibble on some food, so she's munching in the background. Can you hear? Can you hear her munching in the background? Nice, Steve, that's cool. Well, what was I talking about? Yeah, so we've been studying this ancient and medieval music for the past 2 to 3 months or something. Let's just say 2 months. And having delved into that old time period and even ancient time period, you kind of learn about music in a different way, right? It's simple, it's beautiful. It actually is often paired with words. Not always, but a lot of it is. That's kind of where we get the word melody from. Melody is words and music at the same time, I think, or something like that. So anyway, this video today we're going to be discussing how to find your voice, and we're going to be talking about how poetry or any prose or even like a speech or if a quote or poetry can help you to find your voice. One of the things that I've been doing with my studio this week is I put this book in front of them, and right now we're all reading the first one, which is called Into My Own. And it's about looking at some dark trees and then going into them and realizing that they're awesome and that you never want to leave, and that you never want to go back to the real world again, basically. So it's a cool poem. But it's neat because when you first sit down and you read a poem, it's not easy to follow, right? It's a little bit confusing because the flow it's like not our normal way of speaking. So the flow isn't quite like normal for us. And it's also really hard to understand it, right? It's hard to understand a poem right off the bat. What are they talking about? Sometimes it's really hard to understand what they're saying. So then you got to go back, and if you have the will, to read it again and try to get more of a grasp for it. And the best way is actually to read it out loud. So what does this have to do with music? Let's pause there for a second and go back to the music. So, by the way, I have a little blood blister on my thumb. So if you see this little black thing here, it's nothing serious. It's just I hurt myself, and it's a little blister, I guess. So if you think back to the ancient philosophers, and you think back to like Homer writing the Odyssey, who was attributed to writing the Odyssey and the Iliad, a lot of those poems were actually accompanied with music. So music and poetry go hand in hand. And as a musician, when you're trying to find your voice, your interpretation of the piece, or trying to be musical, sometimes it can be really confusing, and it's like, well, I don't really know how to make this my own. I don't know how to make it sound musical. Just show me what I should do and I'll just do it, right? So, but that problem with that is that you don't have your own interpretation of it. So thank you, yeah. So anyway, we're in lessons, we're reading through this poem. First read through, it's all a mess. Second read through, we start to kind of understand what it's about. And that by the third read through, there's actually more of the person's interpretation and voice in the poem when they're reading it. And it's so neat to go through that process with someone, because when we go through the lesson and I show them a new piece, like right now, as I said, we've been studying this medieval music, so medieval, Renaissance, ancient music. When you first read through it, you're kind of just getting the notes, trying to get the feel of it, right? Little cat, can you eat any louder? You've been she's been asleep on the couch like all day, and I've been wanting her. I'm gonna just grab her. Come here. Come say hi to the world. Oh, yes. Come say, oh, please don't escape. Oh, I'll let you go in a second, but maybe you can just say hi to everybody. Nope, okay. All right, well, I tried. So it's neat to go through this process with people, because with words, obviously they mean something to us, and we can start to understand them a little bit faster. So, oh, thank you. And with music, sometimes it can be a little bit abstract. So it's fun to go through that same process with a new piece. It's not super challenging, a little challenging, right? But not like ridiculously challenging. Play through it. Second playthrough, kind of get more of a feel for it, the flow, the character, the mood, whatever it is. And then by the third kind of read through, you've got more of your own grasp of it, so you can put your own emphasis into it, your own voice into it, which is really neat. But anyway, that's the music side of poetry and music, and kind of finding your voice. But I just wanted to tell you how awesome it has been to try to memorize a poem. But first I have to have a sip of tea. So I even wrote down a little list of things I wanted to talk to you about with this, because I feel like it's just so awesome. And I feel like literature and poetry and things like that are things that are just totally foreign to our society right now, because our form of entertainment is like, have you ever had those moments where you're like looking at your phone and it's just like a free moment? So you grab your phone to like see what's going on with your emails and Instagram and YouTube, and then you just kind of like 30 minutes go by and you're like, oh, well, now I have to go do this or something, and so you put your phone down. So all of your free time is being absorbed by this phone, which is a great and fabulous tool. But sometimes you can kind of feel like, is this it? Like, is this the only thing, the only good thing in my life? Like the only entertainment here? All of my knowledge has to come from this thing. All of my connection, all of my interesting thoughts come from here, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't have to be that way. And one of the neat things about just picking up this book of poetry this week has been, one, trying to find my voice, my interpretation of a piece of, poetry, and then comparing that to me picking up a piece and trying to find my interpretation of the piece, and then seeing my students go through that process too. It's been pretty cool. But also the fact that it's really made a huge impact on my mental state of mind, and just my, I don't know, there's like this lightness in my consciousness. So, all right, let me just look at my notes here. So we talked about starting off the lessons with a poem. We talked about like your interpretation and comparing them and things like that. So the interesting side note, music and poetry seem to have gone hand in hand to create this magical experience. And you can look back in history to the ancient times, and you can see that musicians were often poets, right? Poets were often musicians. And music and poetry did go together. Storytelling did go together, and it was all memorized, at least because back then there wasn't like the printing press. There wasn't a huge access to written material, unless you were maybe working for your government and you had to keep track of, the census or whatever it was, your taxes and things like that. But so a lot of entertainment was memorized, which is cool, very, very cool. So you had a person that would go and entertain you. And yeah, forgot where I was going with that. Sometimes I have little memory slips. But the oldest complete song that we have dates back to Greece. I don't know if you can really call it ancient Greece. It comes from the 1st century. It's called the Kalos epitaph, Seik, Seek, Ilos, Ilos or something, Kalos epitaph. It's actually really famous because it's literally the oldest complete surviving song that we have in music history. And it's a poem, and it has music notation. So they've actually figured out little transcriptions of how to play it as well. But it's a cute little thing. It literally says, this is my own version of it, but it basically says, while you're living, don't let anything bother you, because life is short and time demands its toll. So imagine that's the song that's the poetry and music that we have. It's a complete thing. It's the oldest thing that we have. It dates back from the 1st century in Greece, and it's telling you that life is really short and that you should enjoy your life and not let anything bother you. Be happy, and at some point you're not going to be here anymore. So it's a beautiful thing. But it's just neat to use this time. If you are working with poetry, if you are trying to memorize something, it's neat to use this time your free time, whenever you would pick up your phone as your only little source of entertainment there. It's nice for you to use that time to actually go in here and try to remember that one line from the poem you're working on this week, because it's actually like a beautiful jewel. It'll make you feel really good. It's going to make you think about something else besides maybe like trying to seek comfort in here in your phone. It's going to tap you into yourself again. And it's bringing some light into that consciousness that we have. And actually, it seems like a lot of our thoughts during the day are pretty negative. At least that's what I've heard, is that we're not super conscious most of the day. Like we're just going about our day, and then we have this little hamster wheel of thoughts that are going on, you know? And so having something good that's also going on in your consciousness, in your little hamster wheel, like a poem or anything. It could be like, you know, the Gettysburg Address. It could be the Declaration of Independence, an amendment from the Constitution. It could be like an address from like Julius Caesar or Mark Antony or Socrates, or a quote, or anything. It could be a line from your favorite TV show or movie, or like something that Gandalf says in The Lord of the Rings. Anyway, just having that going on upstairs is so cool to add to your little hamster wheel that's there. And I love it. It's really affected me in a really profound way to just have something like a poem to be working on. So let me see if there's anything else that pops into my head. Yeah. The other thing is that when I was really little, and this kind of doesn't really go into finding your voice, but it does kind of go into having some language, some literary thing to mull over in your head and have that to cling to in times that are challenging for you. So when I was really little, I really struggled with going to school, and that was before you know, people would be able to say, well, I have anxiety about going to school, and people would actually take it seriously. So I never knew that I really had anxiety about going to school, but I really had a hard time in school. I really didn't like it, and that was my experience all the way through school, pretty much. So interesting. So my mom would give me like a little quote she would write it down, and I would just keep it in my pocket, or I would just kind of keep it in my sleeve or something, and I would be able to read it throughout the day. And those words were quite comforting to me to just read them. They were like this little thing I could cling to despite having to be uncomfortable and not, you know, particularly like happy, even like really unhappy. Little cat's getting a drink of water. She's so cute. I wish she would come and say hi. She's very antisocial, I guess. But for all of us, I mean, going through life, we're going to go through trials and tribulations. You're going to be in uncomfortable situations. You might have to perform something where you really don't feel like you can, you know, you're not ready, or you might feel all of a sudden a deep sense of, oh my God, anxiety. But if you have, it's an amazing thing that language is to transform how we feel. And just think about the last time you read a really mean YouTube comment, for example, or the last time that you had someone said something to you that either really annoyed you, or could have made you angry. It could have made you feel really special. Right? So the way that we say things is really important, and it is magical, the way that it affects us emotionally. And they're literally just words. They're just these little mouth sounds, like Joe Rogan says. But they have this profound emotional effect on us. And music also has that effect too. And it's the way that you say it, I think, that really makes a huge difference. So, when you're in those uncomfortable situations, when you have something good to cling to, rather than just kind of, oh my God, I'm like freaking out, I'm not happy, I don't know what I'm doing. If you have something good that you're memorizing, or that you have something to cling to that you can call upon for you to kind of help you stay centered, oh my gosh, it is just so cool. It is just so cool. But if anything this week, I want to challenge you to go find something. It doesn't have to be a crazy long thing. It can be a small thing. See if you can just memorize one little line of that for the week. And just every day, say it to yourself a couple times, take a picture of it, put it as your screensaver on your phone, so that when you pick your phone up, you've got your little poem or whatever it is that you want to memorize. And definitely, I mean, try to memorize as much of it as you can. Like, you could just do a stanza, you could do just one little line. And you're going to notice that your interpretation of it changes, your understanding of it changes and deepens as the week progresses. And in those moments when you have free time, instead of picking up your phone, you can actually practice memorizing your poem or whatever it is that you decide to do. So for example, this morning I was getting ready, as I do, and I usually have something in the background to just kind of like fill the space. But instead I was like saying my poem out loud and I was noticing all the different ways that I could say it. And there were certain times that I was like, oh yeah, that was right. And then there were some certain times where I was like, it's okay. But it's like much more, like when you can like say it in a way that's really like it grabs the attention of someone else, it's very cool. So you can have these moments of kind of creativity rather than, and actually having something to do in those moments where you might just go to your phone. And you don't necessarily even need to hold anything because it's all here too. And then the nice thing as well is that if you kind of get your friends and family involved with it too, they can pick something that appeals to them during the week to kind of mentally chew on, so to speak, right? Memorize, read, whatever it is. And then you can, by the end of the week, you can say, well, okay, it's time to, share our poems or whatever it is. And then you first of all have a time to practice saying something clearly with meaning, with your own voice to someone. And then you can also listen back to them say their poem to you. And you can also then discuss how it was presented. Like, did you understand it? Maybe you could have tried it this way. And then you could also discuss the meaning of the poem. So there's just so many things that you could actually spark some interesting conversations with this kind of thing, this like simple little exercise. And I think it's really going to translate into your musical voice too, because it's the same process. It's just a little bit more confusing sometimes with music. There's more details. You got to get the notes, you got to make sure everything is right there, do what's on the page and everything, and then understand what it's about. Like, is it like a romantic piece? Is it passionate? Is it mysterious? Is it asking a question? Like, sometimes there's these moments in this poem where it's like, he's like kind of asking a rhetorical question. But if you don't catch that, then you're just kind of like going through it. But when we ask a question, we usually say it a specific way. Like, how are you doing? We don't say, how are you doing? So there's a specific way to say something. So you're gonna like get into all these little details. It'll be super cool. So, anyway, I think before I wrap this up, are you interested in this at all? Like, does it resonate? Does it sound like it's something that would be interesting for you to do? I'm torturing all my students with this week. And I think actually every week we're going to begin with some kind of poem. It's either going to be one that I choose or one that they kind of find that they like, and if there is a poet that they like. And then that week I'm going to just have everybody just memorize one line or a stanza or just read it so that they can start to develop their own voice, because you have to really consciously know what it is you're saying. When we're talking in the normal world, we just kind of like say things. We don't necessarily notice how it is that we're saying them. So yeah, that's great. So I just think it's like so cool. I'm probably just like overly excited about it. But I think to wrap it up, I'm going to read you the one that I've been showing my studio this week. And I have been trying to memorize it. But I get kind of nervous on these live streams, so I'm going to just read it. And then maybe I'll recite a little bit of it afterwards. We'll see. But this one's called Into My Own, and it's by Robert Frost. Into My Own. Bear in mind, I've like said this about 1,000 times this week, and it's still going to be I'll probably mess up. Okay. One of my wishes is that those dark trees, so old and firm they scarcely show the breeze, were not as 'twere the merest mask of gloom, but stretched away unto the edge of doom. I should not be withheld, but that some day into their vastness I should steal away, fearless of ever finding open land or highway where the slow wheel pours the sand. I do not see why I should e'er turn back, or those should not set forth upon my track to overtake me, who should miss me here and long to know if I still held them dear. They would not find me changed from him they knew, only more sure of all I thought was true. So it's a cool little poem. I really like it for whatever reason. I just feel like it's definitely, you look at those dark trees that are out there and you think, I think I'll go in there. And then you go in there and then you're like, this is so great. And I never want to go back to society again. In fact, I'm going to stay here. And then if anyone who really loves me, they can come and find me as well. And it's just kind of a neat poem. So I like it. The other one that I've been really loving is this by Henry David Thoreau. I really don't know very much about this. Yes, isn't it cool? Definitely find a poetry that you like. I've been, the reason that I even know who Henry David Thoreau is in a small way is because my 6th grade teacher had us memorize I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, like that whole little thing there. It's not necessarily a poem. It's actually part of an essay that he wrote. I guess it's Walden. That's his essay, Walden. I'm in the middle of reading the introduction, and it's really interesting. Apparently, Henry David Thoreau and Emerson were very close. Ralph Waldo Emerson. In fact, Thoreau lived with Emerson. I think when he lived in Walden, that was like a part of the land that Emerson owned. So they were very close, and they're awesome American philosophers and great thinkers. And it's interesting in the introduction, hearing whoever is writing the introduction discuss back then the idea of American culture. Because I guess American culture was considered like this really not very interesting thing, and we had to get our culture from Europe because America was just so uncultured, And I guess there's still that thought today, but it's interesting listening to or reading through this introduction, and they're talking about our American culture is actually about freedom and individuality. And it's just it's just really interesting. I love it. So, because I feel like we are kind of losing our sense of culture in America a little bit. So, anyway, that's something for another day. But Henry David Thoreau writes a lot about nature, just a lot about nature. And as somebody who loves nature, I'm just really excited to get to know this work. Let me just read you a tiny bit of that Walden. Let me see if I can find it, because there's some interesting things in there. Let me just see. I think it's on page 85. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to read you a little bit of the paragraph right before that kind of famous quote, because I think it's kind of interesting. We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. So he's talking about you could decorate your house or something, but you could actually make your life awesome. You could kind of have that same thing, Let me just read that one more time. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do, to affect the quality of the day. That is the highest of arts. To affect the quality of your day, that's the highest of arts. Every man is tasked to make his life, even in its details, worthy of the contemplation of his most elevated and critical hour. If we refused, or rather used up such paltry information as we get, the oracles would distinctly inform us how this might be done. So here's the famous quote. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world. So I feel like he's just talking about like, feel your feelings, like no, just really real, know what's actually real. Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience and to be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. For most men, it appears to me, are in a strange uncertainty about it, whether it is of the devil or of God, and have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of man to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Anyway, he kind of goes on and on and on. It's like so interesting. It's so appropriate for our age. And I think that he lived during an age where there was a lot of nasty things going on. Slavery. There was like the way that people were treated in their jobs as well, like immigrants coming across and being taken advantage of. Just all these interesting things, interesting times that we all live in. You know, that's the proverb, may you live in interesting times. So find something that resonates with you. Try memorizing it, see what happens to your consciousness during the week, and see what happens to your voice and your interpretation, and see that process as you're studying your music as well. Let your voice and your interpretation come through as well. So I'm going to love and leave you with that. I hope that wasn't too out there. And I'll see you next week, okay? You can always follow me on, you know what? I've been posting an awful lot on Instagram. Hi, from Texas, that's cool. I've been posting a lot on Instagram, so if you want to follow me there, it's just Violin Viola Masterclass on Instagram. And I post things that I'm doing with the studio there and just kind of life things, whatever. And then also Patreon / Violin Viola Masterclass. And currently each week I just upload a little mini video talking about some things that would, like intervals. Right now we're going through the intervals and the modes. And it's just like a 5-minute video or so for that, to get you familiar with them and thinking about those things. And then I also kind of like will post something random during the week as well. But I think that I'm going to start doing like a 15 or 20-minute series on technique. Like I love Jillian Michaels. Do you know who Jillian Michaels is? She's that America's trainer, you know. Every day, not every day, but well, maybe almost every day I do one of her routines. I love her killer cardio, yoga inferno, the 30-day shred. All of those workout routines are so good. And she always says, when you're strong physically, you're strong mentally. So, you know, it's good to exercise, isn't it? So things about poetry and the oldest song from Greece. Yes, yes, yes. So the song, the epitaph of Kalos. Epitaph of Kalos is the oldest song that we have, the oldest complete song. There's songs that are older, but they're not complete. This is complete words and complete, music as well. So, anyway, so I follow these Jillian Michael routines, and they're the ones that I really like are about 20 minutes long. And I was just thinking that if I could kind of give you guys a 20-minute or 15 to 20-minute like warm-up technique routine to just get through, because I know a lot of you don't have like a music teacher. So if you, that's going to be coming on Patreon. I'll just start with uploading one once a month for a specific tier, and just test it out to see if you guys like it. No problem. But it's going to be probably 5 to 10 minutes of like a specific warm-ups for your right hand and your left hand, and then 5 minutes of a specific technique, whether it's something having to do with the bow or like shifting or vibrato or getting familiar with a particular position. Just 15 to 20-minute video for that. And so those will be coming, but that's going to be on Patreon. And it's just patreon.com/violin viola masterclass. And of course my website as well, Violin Viola Masterclass. I keep kind of plugging these things, but I just want you guys to know how you can connect during the week, since I'm only here once a week. So Instagram, it's all Violin Viola Masterclass. Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, I think that's all I use. So I'm gonna love and leave you guys. Thank you for joining, and have a magical and fabulous week, okay? Bye.